Good evening, it's Jenna Moore. I'm here from Jenna's Crafting Studio. I am a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in London, Ontario, Canada. Thank you for joining me for Sunday stamping. I'm just jumping on just a minute early, I think, here, just so that Facebook gives you time to let you know I've gone live. And I'm just making sure that everything looks like it's good to go on my computer. So I hope you had a great weekend. The weather was sure nice. So hopefully you were able to get out and enjoy it, doing some yard work or going for a walk or something like that. So hopefully you were able to get out there and enjoy it. Tonight I want to show you a technique that honestly I learned today. So hopefully it goes well. It's an old technique. It's called the baby wipe technique. And the reason I wanted to show you this technique is because I saw another demonstrator use it with the butterfly stamp set that just came out, and it really took me by surprise at how beautiful the technique really was. And so I wanted to try it out, and I had some success today, and so I wanted to share that with you. So I'm going to flip my camera around, so just look away for a second here if you get a little motion sickness, and I'm just going to flip my camera down. So just bear with me for a second. Okay, here we go. Hopefully we're at the right height here. And point my camera down. There we go. Okay, I'm going to get some of this out of the way. So I've got my Stamparatus to use with the butterfly stamp. I find that with such a big stamp, I find it easier to use the Stamparatus with this stamp, and actually I don't own the biggest block that Stampin' Up! Sells. So for me, this is how I've been using the Butterfly Brilliance. So this is the stamp this is in the Butterfly collection, which actually now the designer series paper has sold out in North America and will not be replenished. So the collection can no longer be purchased, but you can purchase the bundle and still get the 10% discount on the stamp set and the dies. Okay, so as you've seen me show before, this stamp is one complete stamp. So it's got all the butterflies together on the red rubber. And then, so first I want to show you a sample that I did with this stamp set, just showing you how the stamp set looks on its own. So I think it makes a really great background if you're not going to use the die to cut out the butterflies. So this I've done in Seaside Spray. I'm just going to see if I can fix my lighting here. So Seaside Spray and using Basic Black. So this designer series paper is from the True Love package, and then this stamp, which I'm using tonight also, is from Happiest of Birthdays. So it's this stamp here tonight I'll be using. It's Your Day. So all I've done on here is I've stamped the background in Seaside Spray, and that's just on basic white cardstock, so nothing fancy there. And I've glued it on the Seaside Spray cardstock and then brought in the black with the stamp. This backing on here, the matting, is the postage stamp punch, also in Seaside Spray. So not a lot of color. I didn't add any embellishments, no ribbon, nothing like that. And I was pretty happy with how that came out. Oh, thanks Nadine, I'm seeing your comment, thank you. So this is one card that I've used with the stamp set. And like I said, tonight I'm going to show you the baby wipe technique. So we'll get started with that. So what you need for the baby wipe technique, if you haven't seen this before, is our baby wipes. So I'm using just a pack of Huggies that I have in my craft room. Sometimes I use them if I'm doing a larger class, which of course I haven't done recently, for people to use with their fingers in the ink. So that's kind of why I have them in my craft room, in case you're wondering why someone would have baby wipes. And then I've got reinkers. So the reinkers you use to refill your ink pads normally, but there are a bunch of other ways that you can use the refills. So these you purchase for $5, and they coordinate with the colors of Stampin' Up. Hi Marilyn. So I've got, what do I have here? Pool Party, and I've got Daffodil Delight. I've got Rococo Rose, which is one of our ink colors that will be retiring at the end of April. Highland Heather, and Pear Pizzazz. So you want at least 3 colors to have enough variation in the color to be able to do this technique. Hi Kelly, nice to see you. So with the technique, you're taking the baby wipe. I've got it on you want it on a hard surface. I tried this on an empty stamp case, and I found that there wasn't enough firm pressure. It was too flimsy with that, so I pulled out my silicone mat just to sort of save my surface from the ink. And then I've got the baby wipe on top. And then what you want to do is grab your reinkers, and you just want to leave some ink in a very random pattern. So I'm just splotching drops of the ink around. So here we go. This one I started with is Rococo Rose. And then I'm going to go in with Daffodil Delight. So what you want to end up with is a pattern, this is going to get a little messy, a pattern of reinker spots all around. And what I did find by experimenting is that you don't want to leave too much blank space in between, because when you go to stamp, you'll end up with blank space wherever you haven't put ink. So you want to make sure you're filling all the spots. Now this might look like a lot of ink, which granted it is. However, this baby wipe, you can, once you're done working on what you're working with, you can put it in a Ziploc sandwich bag or a freezer bag, and it'll last you as long as it stays wet. So probably, you know, a couple days before it dries out. So it will do more than just this one stamping. This afternoon when I was trying this out, I probably did 3 or 4 just as I was going through. So I did, you know, it was still quite saturated as I was doing this. And I'm just going to go back and fill in these 2 spots here just to make sure that I don't have any blank space. So you just want to kind of be a little cautious with getting your fingers all wet, which would be a good reason to have another baby wipe handy just for that. So I think that's enough. And what I'm going to do, so I should get my paper ready here. So I've just cut a piece of basic white. This is 5 1/4 by 4 inches, and I'm going to lay it on my Stamparatus and just make sure that the paper is in the right spot. Because this paper is smaller than the stamp, I'm not using my magnet to hold the paper down. If the paper was bigger than my stamp, then I would use one of the magnets that are stored on the back to hold the paper down. Okay. So the nice thing about the Stamparatus is you can actually take the plates off of the base. So I'm going to use this like I would a block, and I'm going to press this down right in, you know what, I think I need a little more ink at the top here. So if you're using a smaller stamp, you wouldn't need as much ink as I'm using here. You can use any variety of size stamps you want. Okay, because I just want to make sure that this gets everywhere I want it to be. So I'm putting this down on the baby wipe, and then I'm going to use firm pressure to make sure that that ink transfers right onto the stamp. Okay, so you want to watch your rocking motion so you're not shifting the stamp. And then I'm going to lift straight up. I'm going to move the plate over to my Stamparatus and make sure it's stuck in there. And then bring the plate down onto the paper. And then again, I'm using firm pressure so that the ink is getting onto my paper. If I lift ever so slightly, you're going to see it is very light, but it is, I don't know what you call that, almost like tie-dye technique. So you can see, actually, I should have gone back and with the Stamparatus pushed on this area again. So I probably didn't use as much pressure as I needed to there. But you can see down in here, if I can get this in the light and for it to focus, you can see that it does do the whole stamp. Now it's not going to do where I didn't have any ink, but you get this beautiful background with all the different colors. So you could do this with any variation of ink spots that you have. To be honest, I didn't have any rhyme or reason why I chose these colors. I just kind of picked colors I thought would look good together. And actually looking at these, to me, this is like a good collection for Easter. They're kind of all pastels. They're not all from the same family. Like Daffodil Delight is from the Brights, and Rococo Rose is an in color, and then the rest of them are in the subtles. So whatever color combination you have is what I would start with and go from there. Okay, so we have our background. I'm just going to move that baby wipe out of the way so I don't stick my hand in it. And I'm going to get this Stamparatus. So now to put the card together. So now that we've done that technique, I'm going to show you the card that I'm making tonight. So I've used, this is the one I did this afternoon, and of course they're not going to look the same because I did my pattern differently. So in this one, I have the same background, and I've pulled in the Highland Heather as my card base, and also just for this piece here. Because I already had so much going on with the background, I didn't want to use a whole lot on the front of the card, because for one, I didn't want it to be too busy, and second of all, I didn't want to cover up the butterflies at all. Like, I almost would have preferred just to leave it, but of course I always want a sentiment on the front of my card. So with the card base, I've just cut a basic card base. So what that means is it is 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4. And again, this is Highland Heather. Did I score this? I did, but it's very light. I'm gonna grab my bone folder, and I'm just gonna fold this in half. So the other thing I'm going to show you tonight is basic embossing, the heat embossing, because I wanted to add something that would give the card interest without adding embellishments or anything. So I thought embossing would work well with this card. So once the card base is folded, I'm going to take my stamp and seal, and you don't need a lot of time for this to dry because it's just like regular ink on here. So it's not super saturated once you're stamping. So taking my background, and I'm trying to center this on the front of my card base. Okay, just like that. And then the piece of Highland Heather I'm using for my greeting is 4 inches by 1 inch. Okay, I'm going to actually grab my piercing mat here for this stamping. So if you've never seen heat embossing before, what I'm using, I'm pulling the stamp from that Happiest of Birthdays set. So I'm using the It's Your Day, Enjoy It. And for heat embossing, you want to make sure you're using Versamark. Okay, so Versamark is sort of a sticky ink, and you really need that to adhere the embossing powder. I just want to make sure I have everything at hand before I get going with this. So you're just going to stamp your stamp in the Versamark as you would with normal ink. I'm just making sure that I have ink coverage on all of my stamp so that the embossing powder sticks to it. And I'm going to stamp. I'm going to make sure I'm still in camera, but I need to be able to see. Hopefully you don't see my head, because that would be very unprofessional. So I'm stamping to the right edge of that piece, and so you can kind of see that. Oh, Debbie, why do I use the piercing mat? The piercing mat gives, it's like a foam texture, and it gives me, I don't know what you want to call it, like extra pressure when I'm pushing down, so that I'm making sure I'm getting even coverage on my stamp. That way, so if I'm stamping just on paper, depending on what stamp I'm using, sometimes it doesn't matter, but I'm making sure that I'm getting a clear image all the way through my stamp, and I'm not having pieces that that are blank. So the Stamparatus, if you were using that as your stamping platform, you wouldn't have to worry about the piercing mat, and actually the Stamparatus has kind of like a piercing mat in it, so that if you miss spots in your stamp, you can go back and redo it with the Stamparatus. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, let me know and I'll try to answer that better for you. So I've dumped clear embossing powder in containers. I find this is just a way that it doesn't get all over the place. So I just dump, the Stampin' Up! Embossing powder comes in a round container. I just dumped it in this. This is like a lunch container with a snap lid. And I just use a spoon. I'm covering the Versamark with the powder and just tapping off the excess, because you want to make sure wherever you haven't stamped, you don't want the powder on there. I'm going to see if my phone will focus. Well, there we go. So you can see the powder on there. And you do need to use a heating tool. You don't want to leave it like this, because the powder is just going to come off. So let me just grab my heating tool. The heating tool gets very hot, so you want to make sure you're not touching the paper where you are heating it up. So I like to use the spoon just to hold my paper down while I'm heating it up. So I'm using the heat tool, and I'm just going to heat over the stamp, and you'll see it'll change from a matte finish to a glossy finish. So you can, hopefully you can see that there, it's changing. Okay. And so that's what it looks like there. With the clear powder, you get just a very subtle change in the greeting. Now, oh, there we go. So you can see how it's nice and shiny now once I've used the heat tool on it. Okay. And then, so the last thing on this card is just to glue this on. So again, I'm using Stampin' Seal. I'm just putting that on the card here. Okay. And there we go. So hopefully you enjoyed that technique. I hope it was something, if you haven't seen it before or tried it, that's something you're going to try. If I can do it, you can do it. I don't know if that's the right thing to say. To be honest, it took me 2 tries to be able to figure out how to do it. There are some YouTube videos online, so if you want to check out this technique using different stamps, then feel free to do that, of course. And if you have any questions at all about this technique, feel free to leave me a comment, send me a message. I'd be happy to help you. If you have any questions about any of the other products I used tonight, you're always more than welcome to send me a message. I hope you have a great evening and look forward to seeing you next Sunday night for another crafting night. Take care and have a great week. Bye now.